Hi everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And this week on the program, well, we're celebrating a bit of a special anniversary for us. It's our 2-year birthday of the channel. Since then, we've had over 1.7 million views, almost 10,000 subscribers now. So thank you for all of your support over the last 2 years, and obviously still lots more growth to happen. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Now, speaking of success stories, this week on the channel, we're looking at the best-selling Kia vehicle in the company's lineup here in Canada. It's the Sorento. It was first launched back in 2002, and last year in 2016, this was the best-selling car in the company's lineup. The third generation of this vehicle was launched a couple of years back now. In fact, it's one of the first vehicles that we ever tested on the channel in its latest generation. Since then, just little tweaks here and there. But what's interesting about the Sorento is that while it's meant to compete with the likes of the Ford Edge, the Hyundai Sante Fe, the Honda Pilot, the Toyota Highlander, the company with this latest generation really wanted to have a decidedly European feel. Perhaps its biggest competitor, the Hyundai Sante Fe, actually shares a lot of the same underpinnings. Hyundai and Kia are sister companies to one another, so they share a lot of the same technology. We were in that Sante Fe just a couple of weeks ago on the program. It's still fresh in my mind, and I want to see how this thing stacks up. Let's hop inside for our anniversary edition here on Family Wheels. Well, really keen listeners might find that what I'm about to tell you somehow sounds familiar, and that's that you can get the Sorento with 3 possible engine choices. First up is a basic 2.4-liter 4-cylinder engine. That comes on the base trims of this car. Then you've got a slightly peppier but smaller 2-liter turbocharged power plant, and then in our tester here this week we have the 3.3-liter V6, which is also available. Now, if that is somehow ringing a bell for you, it's because those same engines are on offer in the Hyundai Sante Fe. The two companies share a lot of technology with one another. Now, the good news about that is that I was just in a couple of weeks ago the smaller 4-cylinder option that you have available in the base trims of this car, and I found that it was great in the city environment. It did well there, good fuel economy, but it did lack in power. It didn't feel particularly exciting, and once you got it up onto the highway trying to go at a decent clip, it just felt like it was a little bit gutless. If you're looking for more pep, certainly that turbo is going to give it to you with 55 more horsepower, and then you can bump up into this V6, which gives you almost 100 more horsepower. Lots of pull here from both of those engines, and you do have some nice towing capacity out of both of those engines as well. Here in the V6, about 5,000 pounds of towing capacity, and in the 2-liter turbo, a very respectable 3,500 pound towing capacity. Once you bump down into that smaller 4-cylinder, though, you have about 2,000 pounds that you can tow behind it. But for a car of this size, the fact that you can tow up to 5,000 pounds is really nothing to sneeze at. Now, speaking of number crunching, both the turbo and the V6 offer up some pretty comparable fuel economy numbers. Not quite as good here in the V6 in the city, but once you get them onto the highway, they're pretty close to one another. We're actually doing much better than Kia suggests we should with fuel economy in our tester here this week, with an average of about 10 liters per 100 kilometers, with mostly city driving out of that time as well. The downside to this V6, and it was a bit of a surprise to me too, because this is not a particularly pithy engine. It's got 290 horsepower, but it just feels a little bit sluggish off the line when you really go to give it the beans. By the way, if you do want to have 7-passenger seating, which is an option in this car, you have to go for the models of the Sorento with the V6 on board. So you can get into a base LX trim of the Sorento up here in Canada for about $27,500. That's giving you heated front seats. It's giving you 17-inch alloy wheels. It's giving you auto headlights, which is kind of cool. It's a nice feature that you often see on much more expensive vehicles, but not on base vehicles like this. And you're also getting rear backup sensors, but no rear backup camera on the base model, which we're seeing from a lot of the other competitors that are out there. But that vehicle does come with that smaller 2.4-liter 4-cylinder engine that I was talking about, and it also only comes with front-wheel drive. So for all intents and purposes, up here in Canada, where most people are going to want all-wheel drive, you're looking at about a $30,000 base price tag for the Sorento. New for 2017 from the LX Turbo models and up, we have automatic temperature control, and we also have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And this is kind of a big deal because in the Hyundai Sante Fe, we don't have Apple CarPlay as an option on any of the trims, and Android Auto is is only available on the highest level trim of that car. Here in this SX Plus trim that we're in this week as our tester, one of the new additions for 2017 is also autonomous emergency braking. That means that if somebody brakes in front of you, you don't react quickly enough, the car's going to take over and do it for you. But to me, the fact that you have to get into a $47,000 vehicle in the Kia lineup to have that feature, and the fact that it's only come out for 2017, I think that Kia is a little bit late to the race, and I also think that they should be offering it on more of their trims, because if we look at the Toyota Highlander as an example, we have autonomous braking, auto high beams, adaptive cruise control, and lane keeping assist on all but the base trims of that vehicle for 2017. But I gotta say, if I were to close my eyes here, and I'm not gonna do it because I'm driving, but if I were to and run my hands across all of the different surfaces in this car, it feels like a much more luxurious vehicle than the $47,000 price tag in this SX trim would suggest. We've got lots of soft touch surfaces, nice stitching in the door panels and on the dashboard. These Nappa leather seats, really soft, really nice leather, although they are prone to scratching up a little more than the tougher leather in the lower level trims. But the seats are really comfortable for long drives. We have this great big 8-inch infotainment system screen, a 360-degree wraparound parking camera. We have ventilated seats up front here, this huge panorama sunroof. I like this blacked out roof liner. I think it classes things up a little bit, and it just generally feels like a much more expensive and very European, which is what Kia was going for here, vehicle. And that's, I think, a really impressive feat given the price tag in this car. The road manners in this car are also pretty good. I mean, here we are at 100 kilometers an hour right now. I don't feel like I have to yell at you. Our decibel reader pulls out about 64 decibels at highway speed, which is pretty respectable for a bigger SUV. And I also like the way that this car corners. It doesn't have a lot of, yaw when you're looking at going through some windier roads at a bit of speed. It feels much more like a composed sedan than it does a large 7-passenger SUV. Now, the downside to that is that it's not going to be much of an off-roader. You could certainly use it for going down a little, gravel road off to your cabin, but if you need that extra bit of clearance to really get adventurous on the weekends, you want to probably look at something with a bit more ground clearance. This has 185 millimeters, the Subaru Outback has 220 millimeters, and if you really want to get crazy and do some nuts off-roading, then the Jeep Grand Cherokee offers up to 275 millimeters of ground clearance. But let's be honest, most people are going to be cruising around in this car in the urban environment. Kia says that its target demographic are slightly more active people, but city dwellers in their 40s. They're not going to be going off and doing any crazy, rock crawling in a Kia Sorento after all. And if you are using this as a family vehicle, a couple of other important things in this car to keep in mind. First up, it has Kia's 5-year, 100,000 kilometer warranty, which is one of the best in the business, and it also gives you a top safety pick rating from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. But we do have one area in which the Sorento is lagging behind a little bit, and that's in its headlight strength. According to the IIHS, it's got a poor rating on that front. This is something that's become more important over the last couple of years. The IIHS has started to test for it. Obviously, really important to have good visibility when you're night driving. We do have a couple of new additions for the Sorento for 2017 when it comes to its headlights, and that's that in the SX and SX Plus trims, you have directionally adaptive headlights, which means that as you go into a corner, the headlights are actually going to pivot in their socket and take that corner with you, so you can see around the bend just a little bit better. And then we also have auto leveling headlights. So if you've got, a heavy load in the back end, you're pulling a trailer, it's squatting back a little bit and the headlights are pointing up into the sky, then they're going to adjust downwards so you can actually see the road a little bit better. But they're still not quite as bright as the IIHS would like, and if you're doing a lot of night driving, then that's just a little something to keep in mind. The second row here in the Sorento is really comfortable. We've got a nice amount of legroom here for tall people like me. I've adjusted the driver's seat for someone who's about 6 foot, and I'm 6'2" back here. Still lots of legroom. Headroom's pretty good too. I wouldn't want to be much taller than this, but if you are a little bit taller, then you can still use this recline function to kind of laze back a little bit and not be grazing the roof liner quite so much. That's also good for longer drives if you want to try and have a snooze. Higher level trims of this car come with heated seats in the second row. We have have a 115 volt household style plug-in point down here on higher trims too, which is a handy thing if you've got a cooler, a tool that you're trying to run back here, something like that. We have these built-in sunscreens, which we also saw in the Sante Fe. Really handy for people who've got younger kids in car seats still. Speaking of car seats, front facing here in the second row, no problem, but rear facing car seats are actually much tighter than I expected them to be. Our car seat is convertible. It's one of those ones that can go either way, and it's sort of in the mid-range size. Even still, we're getting about 25 inches of legroom for the front passenger, from the back of the seat cushion up to the glove box. That's really tight. So tight, in fact, that even the smallest of adults are going to feel pretty pinned in up there. We compare that to the big crew cab Toyota Tundra that I was driving around last week. We had about 31 inches, about 28 inches in the Toyota Highlander. That little bit of extra space goes a long way. It's a squeeze up here with rear-facing car seats. Another issue that I have with this car when it comes to car seats is that if you want to access the third row, you have to do it from this side. And this is often the side where people like to have their car seats, so that if you have just one kid, then, you know, mom or dad driving along can keep an eye on your child, sort of just looking over your shoulder. It was like that when I tested it back in 2015. I've seen other reviewers complain of that as well. Strange that Kia hasn't addressed that issue and given us an easy slide function over here too. Now, speaking of the third row, let's hop in back there. It's a squeeze. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Well, you can see what I mean here. Headroom totally maxed out for a tall adult, and my legs are kind of wrapped up around my knees as well. We compare this to the second row of the Sorento, where we have a totally flat floor. It means that even that middle position, there's not that awkward hump that you have to perch your feet on top of. Here in the third row, certainly my knees are much more around my nose, that's for sure. One thing that I also am not crazy about with the higher level trims of this car, we have leather seating surfaces, and we have these pinhole perforations, not just in the second row, but also even here in the third row. Those are tough to keep clean. Things spill, kids spill stuff, and you got to kind of scrub out all those tiny holes. Now, speaking of kids, if you're looking at putting car seats here into the third row, unlike many of its competitors, there are no latching points here in the third row of this vehicle for, you know, car seats. So you have to use the conventional seatbelt technique. It's weird that we don't have latching points here in such a family-oriented vehicle here in the third row. You can only get the third row of the Sorento in V6 models, and it means that you have to get into some of the more expensive trims of this car. This certainly feels not nearly as comfortable as the Honda Pilot, more in line with sort of the third row that I've seen in the Mazda CX-9. You can use it in a pinch, but you're not going to want to use this as an everyday three-row vehicle. Now let's see if I can climb out of this thing with any grace at all. And show you what it looks like when that third row is up in terms of trunk capacity. You don't have a lot of it, about 320 liters, which again isn't quite as good as we see in many of the competitors. That means that when it comes to fitting in our standardized trunk test, I'm not actually able to do it when this third row is up. The stroller doesn't quite fit the bags, backpacks and grocery bags and all that stuff. It's just not enough space. But it's really easy to put this third row down like so, and then you've got over 1,000 liters of trunk capacity, which puts it right in line with the Hyundai Sante Fe. If you go for the Sante Fe XL, the slightly extended version of that vehicle, you wind up with over 1,100 liters of space, but 1,000 liters gives you plenty of room for our standardized trunk test for the family dog. And if you do need that extra little bit of space, here's something else which is kind of cool. You can pull this lever right here, and the second row flips around with the flip of a button. Check this out. Again, we see that on higher level European vehicles. I see this in the Audi Q5, for example. But to have it here on this car is also a really cool function. Long items are going to fit in here really nicely and without issue. A nice flat floor. Well, it really is no wonder that the Kia Sorento has climbed to the top of the Kia heap. It's a great vehicle with lots of excellent options. When it comes to basic trims, you still get some pretty decent packages. When it comes to this SX trim, you're getting great value for your money, and it definitely punches way above its weight class in terms of its fit and finish and quality of material. Comparing this to the Hyundai Sante Fe, again, its biggest competitor and a vehicle that shares so much of its componentry. I like the exterior looks more on this vehicle. I also think that its fit and finish, its attention to detail on the interior is just a little bit better. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this car and how it stacks up perhaps to the Sante Fe. Maybe you're cross-shopping and all the other competitors that are out there. Please leave a comment below, and then check out my report card that I put together for you this week at familywheels.ca. Thanks for tuning into our anniversary edition of the program. Next week I'm going to see you in the Honda Civic hatchback. I was saying when I first saw that car launch that if there was a wagon version of that car, I'd definitely go and buy it. Let's see if there's any truth to that next week on the program. Thanks for tuning in.